Munich, February 9, 1879. My dear Howells, I have just received this letter from Orion. Take care of it, for it is worth preserving. I got as far as 9 pages in my answer to it, when Mrs. Clemens shut down on it and said it was cruel and made me send the money and simply wish his lecture success. I said I couldn't lose my 9 pages, so she said send them to you. But I will acknowledge that I thought I was writing a very kind letter. Now just look at this letter of Orion's. Did you ever see the grotesquely absurd and the heartbreakingly pathetic more closely joined together? Mrs. Clemens said, raise his monthly pension. So I wrote to Perkins to raise it a trifle. Now only think of it. He still has 100 pages to write on his lecture, yet in one inking of his pen he has already swooped around the United States and invested the result. You must put him in a book or a play right away. You are the only man capable of doing it. You might die at any moment, and your very greatest work would be lost to the world. I could write Orion's simple biography and make it effective, too, by merely stating the bald facts. And this I will do if he dies before I do. But you must put him into romance. This was the understanding you and I had the day I sailed. Observe Orion's career. That is, a little of it. 1. He has belonged to as many as 5 different religious denominations. Last March he withdrew from the deaconship in a Congregational church and the superintendency of its Sunday school, in a speech in which he said that for many months, it runs in my mind that he said 13 years, he had been a confirmed infidel, and so felt it to be his duty to retire from the flock. 2. After being a Republican for years, he wanted me to buy him a Democratic newspaper. A few days before the presidential election, he came out in a speech and publicly went over to the Democrats. He prudently hedged by voting for 6 state Republicans also. The new convert was made one of the secretaries of the Democratic meeting and placed in the list of speakers. He wrote me jubilantly of what a 10-strike he was going to make with that speech. All right, but think of his innocent and pathetic candor and writing me something like this a week later. I was more diffident than I had expected to be, and this was increased by the silence with which I was received when I came forward, so I seemed unable to get the fire into my speech which I had calculated upon, and presently they began to get up and go out, and in a few minutes they all rose up and went away. How could a man uncover such a sore as that and show it to another? Not a word of complaint, you see, only a patient, sad surprise. 3. His next project was to write a burlesque upon Paradise Lost. 4. Then, learning that the Times was paying Hart $100 a column for stories, he concluded to write some for the same price. I read his first one and persuaded him not to write any more. 5. Then he read proof on the New York Evening Post at $10 a week and meekly observed that the foreman swore at him and had ordered him around like a steamboat mate. 6. Being discharged from that post, he wanted to try agriculture. Was sure he could make a fortune out of a chicken farm. I gave him $900, and he went to a 10-house village miles above Keokuk on the riverbank. This place was a railway station. He soon asked for money to buy a horse and light wagon, because the trains did not run at church time on Sunday, and his wife found it rather far to walk. For a long time, I answered demands for loans, and by next mail always received his check for the interest due me to date. In the most guileless way, he let it leak out that he did not underestimate the value of his custom to me, since it was not likely that any other customer of mine paid his interest quarterly, and this enabled me to use my capital twice in 6 months instead of only once. But alas, when the debt at last reached $1,800 or $2,500, I have forgotten which, the interest ate too formidably into his borrowings, and so he quietly ceased to pay it or speak of it. At the end of 2 years, I found that the chicken farm had long ago been abandoned, and he had moved into Keokuk. Later, in one of his casual moments, he observed that there was no money in fattening a chicken on 65 cents worth of corn and then selling it for 50. 7. Finally, if I would lend him $500 a year for 2 years, this was 4 or 5 years ago, he knew he could make a success as a lawyer and would prove it. This is the pension which we have just increased to $600. The first year, his legal business brought him $5. It also brought him an unremunerative case where some villains were trying to chow some Negro orphans out of $700. He still has this case. He has waggled it around through various courts and made some booming speeches on it. The Negro children have grown up and married off now, I believe, and their litigated town lot has been dug up and carted off by somebody. But Orion still infests the courts with his documents and makes the welkin ring with his venerable case. The second year he didn't make anything. The third he made $6, and I made Bliss put a case in his hands, about half an hour's work. Orion charged $50 for it. Bliss paid him $15. Thus, 4 or 5 years of slaving has brought him $26, but this will doubtless be increased when he gets done lecturing and buys that law library. Meantime, his office rent has been $60 a year, and he has stuck to that lair day by day as patiently as a spider. 8. Then he by and by conceived the idea of lecturing around America as Mark Twain's brother, that to be on the bills. Subject of proposed lecture, on the formation of character. 9. I protested, and he got on his war paint, couched his lance, and ran a bold tilt against total abstinence and the red ribbon fanatics. It raised a fine row among the virtuous Keokukians. 10. I wrote to encourage him in his good work, but I had let a mail intervene. So, by the time my letter reached him, he was already winning laurels as a red ribbon howler. 11. Afterward, he took a rabid part in a prayer meeting epidemic, dropped that to travesty Jules Verne, dropped that in the middle of the last chapter last March to digest the matter of an infidel book which he proposed to write. And now he comes to the service to rescue our noble and beautiful religion from the sacrilegious talons of Bob Ingersoll. Now come, don't fool away this treasure which Providence has laid at your feet, but take it up and use it. One can let his imagination run riot in portraying Orion, for there is nothing so extravagant as to be out of character with him. Well, goodbye, and a short life and a merry one be yours. Poor old Methuselah. How did he manage to stand it so long? Yours ever, Mark.